George Barley was a great friend of mine. We loved fishing together. We loved fishing in Florida Bay.
So they went out to Sandy Key Basin, which used to be a beautiful, crystal clear, almost aquarium-like place to fly fish for tarpon.
And all of a sudden, where we're fishing, we realize we're in the middle of this algae bloom and there's nothing alive under it. And George was so angry, literally, I thought his face was going to turn purple.
They were literally witnessing the implosion of Florida Bay. All the problems in the Everglades were a consequence of decisions made in the 40s and 50s to engineer the Everglades. Instead of water flowing south from the lake into the Everglades, it was sent east and west to the estuaries. The thinking was we could create an economic paradise in South Florida and have large swath of land reclaimed from the Everglades for agriculture and for development. And in reality, that economic miracle came true. 8 million people live in South Florida, but it came at a cost, and the paradox is that the cost was so high that it imperils the future of all of Florida.
It's as most things start, in your own backyard. Their backyard was Florida Bay, and they were trying to figure out what was happening to it.
How could this be? What was happening? What was causing this beautiful place and nature to just go away and become a cesspool?
And what they found out is people were focused on birds, or they were focused on just water, or they were focused on the trees. Nobody was focused on the big picture.
The Everglades themselves were undergoing fires and droughts and massive floods.
The reality was that the entire ecosystem was dying.
And so that's when they decided to form the Everglades Foundation. So in the beginning, George was the chairman of the foundation, and when he died, I became the chairman.
We all knew that this fight was the most important thing to him, and we weren't going to stop working until we achieved our original vision.
I went to see Paul, and we went over everything that we'd been through, and that's when we decided to go ahead and make a difference in how the Comprehensive Everglades Plan was adopted.
The Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan laid out a roadmap how we can fix and save the Everglades.
Over the next 10 years, Mary worked tirelessly to get CERP passed.
When the legislation was passed, I was in the room with President Clinton. I can remember just looking down and hardly believing that it was really happening.
We were kind of like the dog that caught the car. Now all of a sudden we had this multi-billion-dollar project passed by the Congress. And the challenge was going to be getting it actually built and implemented.
The board of directors of the Everglades Foundation made a conscious decision to reinvent the organization with a science basis.
And that decision alone single-handedly changed this whole debate.
Because we'd moved from getting a law passed into getting projects built.
We now have 8 distinguished Ph.D.s who are experts in the science of the Everglades. Biologists, ecologists, economists, hydrologists, water quality experts. They have the expertise to understand what needs to be done, in fact, to save this ecosystem.
They wanted to make sure the input was above the political fray and was eminently practical.
The issue here is simply having Lake Okeechobee water flow south. Water that is the lifeblood of Florida. It's the drinking water supply for 8 million people. Florida made national news for all the wrong reasons.
When it's heavy rainfall in the summer, the water level gets too high in Lake Okeechobee, and they dump it out the Caloosahatchee and the St. Lucie River and destroy those estuaries.
We had toxic blue-green algae in marinas and in backyard waterfront properties along the coast. And we were under a state of emergency.
I don't think anybody ever thought it would get to this. This has been a crisis that has been worse than anybody expected.
The solution to that is to take that lake water, store it in a reservoir, clean it, and then send that water south down here to the Florida Keys.
I was disgusted, and I called Eric, and we put a group together, and we met here in Islamorada.
And we pledged in his office on that day in January of 2016 that we were going to do something about it.
So the Now Everglades Coalition was formed, and it's an incredible coalition because it brought together all of the citizens of the state of Florida.
We reached out to the business community. We talked to realtors, to anglers, to boaters, to individuals who make a living because of the Everglades.
Local politicians and local people of influence and the chambers of commerce and the hotel industry are beginning to understand that without this, they're not going to exist.
With political support now in Tallahassee, we are on the verge of having a project that we've been 18 years in the waiting, a reservoir south of Lake Okeechobee where lake water can be stored, cleaned, and that water can be sent south.
But even though we have now support in Tallahassee, the fight's not over. We need to stay focused and united to make this finally happen, or they'll find a way to stop it.
It was our board of directors who said we must begin to educate the next generation.
Our newest initiative is the Education Initiative. It has caught all of us by surprise at how successful and how effective it has been. We are targeting children in kindergarten all the way through their senior year.
We need to have them understand what it really means to them, their future with their children, their grandchildren.
And we are now in 20 school districts across Florida and growing. A program that has trained some 3,000 teachers, brought lesson plans to 65,000 students across this state.
And as we educate these future generations, we will give them the tools to continue the fight that we're in.
The Everglades is not a mountain range. It's not something that you can see from your home. It's a swamp. But when you go out here and you see the life that's out here, and you go into the deepest parts of the Everglades and there's no sound around you, and you look up at night and you see the entire solar system, it brings back the majesty and the beauty of this place.
I love the Glades, and I think we have one last shot, and we're coming to the end of the time to do that. And if we don't do it, it's gone. It's gone.
It's not about pressuring people to do things. It's about making people aware of what is right. And if people understand what it is, they will follow this mission.
It's going to take teamwork to enlighten people, to bring about the resources, and to bring this to the forefront and keep it at the forefront. George Barley and Paul Tudor Jones, they had a lot of vision. They didn't mind to put their money and their efforts where their heart was. It was very inspirational.
Never, never give up, because if you do, you lose. And we can't do that.
Many years ago when I was out in that boat with George Barley, I learned something then that changed my life. If you love something, if you cherish something, if you value something, you better be ready to fight for it.